where does this scarcity mindset come from where we think there's only room for one? I think a lot of times it's easy to feel like you're on the verge of failure, right? Like I always feel like I'm on the verge of failure, right? And maybe it's because I push myself to that point where it's like, if I'm not feeling close to failure, I feel like I'm not trying hard enough. But when you feel like you're on the verge of failure, you start looking around and you're like, hey, I don't have to be the fastest person, right? Like let's say you're running away from, there's like the joke, it's like you're running away from somebody. It's like, I don't have to be the fastest person. I just can't be the slowest person, right? Like if a bear is chasing you, I don't have to be the fastest person. I just gotta make sure I'm not the slowest person. And I think a lot of times, like when people look around and it's like, there's this expectation that, oh, well, if it's between me and this other brother over here, I don't need to be faster than everybody else, but I need to make sure I'm at least faster than you, right? Because this is a mindset that I think our dependence on white made institutions are, right?
To go back to that point, I feel like some of this is induced by society, and the fact that, like, in corporate America, sometimes they only need one person there. They only need one token. So for them, it's like, hey, I can say that I'm diverse because I have a Black person on my staff. It doesn't matter who the Black person is, I have a Black person. And then when the numbers get up there, sometimes they're like, well, having 2, having 3 is overwhelming. So they are only looking for, that one token. So I think that at least back in the day, that helped create that competition where, internally Black people are feeling like they're competing with each other because now they've got us pitted against each other because only one of us can get there. And I think we still have that mindset now, even though we don't necessarily need to, because there is room for us in these spaces. For the most part, I feel like there's an opportunity for us to have more than one. Whether or not we'll be selected in more than one is a different story, but there's an opportunity for more of us to exist than in previous decades and lifetimes. But I feel like we still have that internal mindset where if somebody else is there, they already got a Black CEO. So why do they need diverse boards, right? Why do they need more executives at this level? They have enough to say, look, we've got your diversity here. So I think that's something that we also have to get past, where we recognize that we're not each other's enemy. Regardless of what the system has put in place and how it's kind of divided us, that's not an issue between me and you. That's a societal issue, a systemic issue that we need to tackle in that direction, not against, one another.
Well, I'll add to that, and I'll add the personal experience there. I remember, and I've told you this story in the past before, I'm not gonna say any names in this situation, but I remember there was one initiative where I was leading the hiring and really, focusing on diverse hiring. And I remember I, did what I had to do, and I had a really strong group of African Americans included in this diverse slate of candidates. And we got to the end, and typically when the hiring happens, like, you'll go through different interview processes, and then there'll be a calibration at the end where all the interviewers come together. I had my candidates there, and everybody was on the board, and I was looking at it, and based on the rating system that they have, like, you have different categories. Based on the rating system, I saw my candidates, I was like, let's go. They're definitely getting hired. So I was like, this is a win. And they got to this one girl's name. And when they got to her name, I was like, oh man, let's go. And it was a group of, the large portion of people in the room were white, and there were 2 Black women in the room that were part of the interview panels. And then there was me, and I was just observing, right? Because I brought them to the table, but I'm not gonna be the decision maker. So I'm sitting there, and when they get to this person's name, one of the Black women steps up immediately and vocally is like, I interviewed this person, I would not give them the opportunity. My jaw dropped. Like, it was like Kill Bill, like hearing the sirens, and my jaw dropped. I was so frustrated, but I couldn't let it show. Because now you have all these, everybody knows that this candidate was Black. They could see that this person was Black. they see the scores, and the first person that speaks up is a Black woman that in their mind, they were probably expecting this Black woman to be an advocate for this Black candidate. And she's like, no, I would not give them. I don't think that they have the experience, X, Y, and Z. So doing my job as like a good recruiter, I pushed back a little bit. I didn't expect to have to push back against her though. I pushed back a little bit. Say, hey, listen, this is the feedback that you gave, but the feedback that you gave is actually inaccurate because the experience that you said that they didn't have, they actually do have it here, here, and here. And they were like, oh, I didn't even, or it was like vice versa. And they're like, oh, I didn't even realize that. I was like, yeah, they were so good at explaining their story to you that you didn't even realize their background was completely different. That's how good of a communicator they were. And I remember she was like, oh, okay. Well, I still wouldn't hire her. And so I was like, okay, I already pushed back. I'm not gonna fight you in front of all these other, these white people. So then this is where it came crazy. This is what was wild to me. There was a few white men that had interviewed this person, and they were like, I'll never forget the word. They said, well, when I interviewed, I thought she was remarkable. She showed me flashes of genius. That's literally what they said. And then another person was like, yeah, I thought they would be really good as well. And then the Black woman stepped up again and was like, no, like vehemently no. So then all the other people were like, okay, she's a no. So I remember my boss was there. We were looking at each other like, what's going on here? So that was that. Another one of my candidates was interviewed, and they were like a little bit lower ranked, but like the ranking is just a general, there's a conversation behind it. They're a little bit lower ranked. The other Black woman was like, yeah, I think that this person was really good. And then everybody was like, okay. And then the person got hired. So then afterwards, I remember me and this person were speaking, this interviewer, and this interviewer was amazing. Like as a person, as a mind, everything. And I spoke to this person, they were like, nah, this person was not the one. And she made a few comments that I was like, are you kidding me? So like one of the things that they commented on was how excited this girl was to be there. They're like, you're too excited. You gotta act like you've been here before. I'm like, they're confiding in you, like that they're excited about this role. That was one. And then another comment was, and I'm almost hesitant to even say it, but like this person actually commented on the girl's hair and how it was not like, it was in like a ponytail or something. And when they commented on it, I was like, I think you missed. And she was like, I'll help you find some of the real rock stars. They're like, who do you think is a rock star? And I was like, well, I think this person's a rock star, like within the company. And they're like, no, not that. And I was like, well, how about this person? They're like, exactly, that person. I'm like, you understand that this person shows a certain way, but that doesn't mean that they're better than this other person. That means that they show different ways, their experiences are different, but they're both rock stars. So I'll never forget that happened. So sometimes even in those situations, and this is a long-winded story, but it was a very important thing where a lot of times it's not just about like this person doing the job, doing their best, like putting the effort forward. What I ended up learning later on was I think that person was having a lot of issues within that company, and what they even mentioned to me was they didn't want that person to be exposed to the things that they were going through at that company. So I was like, yeah, but that's not you. That's not your place to project your issues onto that person to protect them. If they fail, let them fail on their own. We had that conversation. We ended up leaving it. That person ended up going on to get another great job, and they're doing phenomenally in their career because I actually still track them. But that's just like a story that I think about when we start talking about these like corporate environments and how people show up and how are we sharing these opportunities, and going back to each one teach one, because that's what this is about. One of the things that I was saying was like, hey, this is why we have ERGs here as well. Our ERGs are ready to provide mentorship and guidance to some of these people that may be able to come in, or their managers or whatever it is. So sometimes we're just hesitant to help people for reasons that I don't necessarily understand where it comes from. There's a lot of self-healing that we have to do so we can help people.
I think that you touched on something that, again, on my side in corporate, I've also experienced this, like with other people coming in, where the idea of somebody being unpolished, right? Bringing in younger students. I remember there was a girl who came in at the first media company I worked at, and she had come in as a sales assistant. She was so bubbly. Like, when I tell you, her personality was amazing. She was very curious. She was like very outgoing. And I think it threw a lot of people off. Like, they were not comfortable with that. And it came off to some people as she's unpolished because she was so willing to coming in as a sales assistant, having conversations with VPs and EVPs. She was the type of person that would go right up to them and talk to them, ask them about their day. And people were put off by that because they're like, who is she to come right? She's unpolished to them because she didn't know how it worked. Like, she didn't get the politics of like the industry. You don't just go up to this person in everybody else's mind. Like, you need to work your way up, like, stay in your place, girl. And it really killed me because the way that people perceived her, I'm like, this is a positive thing. And instead of sitting her down, like some of the other executives, at this point, I'm in my early 20s, I'm a coordinator. I don't know the industry either. I don't have that pull. Like, what am I supposed to do? But like, you have these other people in senior roles who are kind of other Black people in these roles who are kind of looking down on her for being unpolished because she's out of her place. And instead of just pulling her to the side and giving her and schooling her on, hey, like, let's do things this way, or giving her tips to present herself better or, you know, a little bit differently. It just kind of killed me because we're very critical of ourselves. And I think that part of the gatekeeping comes out of that, where we're so fearful of somebody coming in and messing everything up. And now that's going to reflect on us. If there's only 3 Black people in the company and somebody comes in and does something outrageous and embarrasses, you know, God forbid they embarrass, you know, the other Black people that actually work there and also have to exist in the same space, it's just like they feel like that's taking the opportunity away. And we talk about this too, the idea of everyone, because it's crazy because we work in 2 different industries. We've been in the same industry, we've kind of worked in the same spaces, but we've heard similar things when other people are speaking about, you know, Black candidates, young Black candidates, students, especially when they're like, yo, they seem a little bit unpolished, right? Like, that's the word they love to use because their experience with them doesn't align with the experience they've had with other, you know, white candidates or Asian candidates or other cultures. And for me, instead of that, should be a teaching moment for us where we can say, okay, if this comes up multiple times, maybe there's something to it in the sense that whether we agree or not, maybe there's something that's presenting that we need to get ahead of. How can we prep our students to be better prepared to interview, you know, to interview well? The same prep that these other students are getting in their colleges that an HBCU might not have the resources to provide, right? So how can we do that as opposed to just trying to separate ourselves from them so that we're not feeling like, oh, we're embarrassing the culture? I just feel like it's a missed opportunity to help educate and prepare them better to get through these experiences, which has always been kind of mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, it's something that you said, and this is a thought that I had while as you were speaking, was I think that a lot of people want to be part of your success, but not part of your struggle. Right? So when you're going through the process of learning, when you're going through the process of figuring things out, when you're going through the process of trial and error and like sleepless nights or whatever, right? When you're going through those times of imposter syndrome and fear and doubt and all of these things, nobody's there. But then once you start to figure it out, now all of a sudden everybody's like, yeah, each one teach one. It's like, hold on a second. Like, at this point, I kind of just want to do it on my own because like, I don't really necessarily know if I even want you to share in my success with me because you didn't share in my struggle with me, right? So that's something that happens. And I think that something that Ellie also spoke about was, he spoke about the idea of mentorship, to pivot into that. Because I think each one teach one and mentorship, they go hand in hand. So when he spoke about mentorship, he said that our culture is the only culture that's always looking for mentors. Like, let me find a mentor, let me find a mentor, let me find a mentor. Whereas these other spaces, it's the mentors, they're looking for mentees. And what I've seen a lot of times now is, and I could be wrong, so feel free, if anybody disagrees, feel free to say that, right? But like, comment respectfully. But the thing is that when it comes to mentors, sometimes in our community, it's almost like a status thing. Like, yeah, my mentee, or my mentee is doing this thing, my mentee is doing that thing. And I even can say for myself that I would not say that I have any mentors. Maybe it's daddy issues. Somebody once told me that, but like, I know that I have resources, right? So people that I can go to and ask a question. Sure, right? I have advocates, so people that would say, yeah, Darnell's all right. Darnell's a real one, right? Or sponsors, people who will talk well about you when you're not in the room. But for me, I think mentors, they will have a vested interest in making sure that you're not making certain mistakes that they may have already made, understanding what you want to do and not necessarily telling you do what I did, but saying, hey, if you want to do X, Y, and Z, this may be the best way to do it. Checking in on you, because checking in means that, like, yeah, you have if you invest in something, right? If you sometimes you're gonna look to see how that stock is doing, right? So if you're a mentor, but you're never checking in on your stock, then you're not really mental, because you're not invested, right? So I think that these are all the things that happen, and as a culture, it's kind of interesting to me because of the fact that I feel like there's this idea of mentorship where the reason why I don't think I have mentors is because I don't necessarily know if anybody's expressed that investment in me that I know I intentionally express in what I would be comfortably calling my mentees. And then there are some people where I qualify myself as a resource to them, where it's like, I'm not mentoring you because I'll give you the information and then I'll dip, but I'll always be there to give you the information. So I qualify myself as a resource. So there's that. But I think in our culture, there's this like thing where we want to call ourselves mentors when we may not be mentors. And we end up having a lot of people who are trying to do the work. I've gotten to the point where when I go to talk to people, I'm just giving them updates. Like, I will aggressively give people updates. Just so people, that thing that Chris said, where it's like, well, if they need to show me they're the real one. Every single time you talk to me, I want you to be like, oh, yesterday Darnell was at point A. Oh, I spoke to him today. Oh, he's at point C. Tomorrow you mess around, you might talk to me, I might be at point Z, right? And that's because you're putting such a huge burden on the mentee to prove to you that they're worthy of your mentorship and worthy of your time. That's why we get set back, because it's like you're literally putting other Black people in a position to have to fight and claw by themselves to just be worthy of your knowledge and information.
I mean, I think that that's a great point to sort of wrap on, just the idea going back to the original question, like, do we have a responsibility to provide our time, resources, and expertise? And I think to other Black people, and I think that we're on the same page about this. We do agree that the education is important and that we all have a responsibility to provide these resources for the stage that we're at to help bypass to bypass some of the struggles that we've had for other people coming up. But at the end of the day, we should be willing to do that because it lifts us all up. We're not gonna be in those situations where somebody's coming into the company behind you and you're feeling so flustered and anxious about the fact that this person might come in and not be the best representation. And now it's gonna reflect on the very few people that are in that company. Like, we all have an investment like whether we are actually investing our time into them, we all have an investment in seeing other Black people do well, because we're 13% of this country. You know, we're around 13% of the country. And when it comes to certain spaces, we're definitely the minority. We're even fewer than that. I think they said out of small businesses, only 2% are Black owned. So that's very few. So we need to be making sure that our energy is placed in not only making the ones who even have gotten to that point to open an official business. We need to be invested in making sure that they succeed, whether it's a small business or whether they're in corporate doing that. And at the same time, like, that's going to reflect back on us. And that giving them that chance to be successful gives more people the chance to break out under them. And I think that that's something that we have to be really intentional about. And at the same time, pay people what they're worth. We need to value each other enough to say, even though you're a small business, you're a small Black business, I shouldn't take you any less seriously than I would another business. So I'm gonna pay you what you're asking for. There's no discounts here. There's no, questioning my process and what I'm doing. I'm gonna respect that. And at the same time, I also will expect that you're going to deliver that same service to me at that level that I'm expecting if I'm going to be giving you this.
Yeah. If that's the relationship, right? So, and you just made me think of a quote to end it on, is like, a rising tide carries all ships, right? And that's kind of, sometimes we as a people, when this each one teach one thing, we get so focused on the ship that we don't think about the tide, right? It's the rising tide. We need to be focusing on that, and sharing that information and sharing that knowledge is what creates the rising tide, and then we'll figure the ship thing out later on. But anyway, that's the end of this one. Thank you for watching, as always. So important. I will always end with, keep the conversation going. Talk about this at dinner with your family. Talk about it with your loved ones. Talk about it with your friends. Talk about it with your kids. Comment. We'll comment with you. We'll talk with you about it, because the goal is how do we uplift the culture. So let's just keep the conversation going. This has been DYKB Creators Kickback. I'm Darnell.
And I'm Alyssa.
Peace.